Fabulous. So what I'm going to do now is just going to hand over to Lizzie just to give a brief introduction. Lizzie is an account executive at Beyond, and she joined Beyond a short while ago, 7 months ago, but she is keeping her finger on the pulse, specifically the UK market. In fact, you may have met her at the recent ASSC event in Glasgow or even at Scale in London. So without too much more from me, I'm going to hand over the reins to you and let you chat about Beyond's dashboard and insights.
Thank you so much, Brenda. Wonderful. Okay, yeah, so thank you so much, Brenda, for the introduction. And like you've mentioned, I'm going to be looking a little bit about Beyond and dynamic pricing today, but also giving a bit of context about where that sits within revenue management as a whole. I'll just move to this slide here, explain revenue management, and then go into how dynamic pricing is situated within a revenue management strategy. And then as you've explained, ensure that it's clear on how the rates are established, what data we're utilizing to create those rates, and how they adjust over time in order to have confidence for not only yourselves as property managers, but also for the communication with owners, whether they're existing owners or also bringing on new owners as well. So what is revenue management before we jump in? And I think, revenue management systems are often seen as something that's quite a new technology within the industry. But actually, a lot of the systems or a lot of the tools that make up revenue management strategies have lived within property management systems like SuperControl for many years. As you've explained just there, even just setting rates or managing stay restrictions, that's all being part and parcel to a successful revenue management strategy. Okay. But here what we can actually see is there's various different management tools that come together in terms of making a good revenue management strategy. And it's not simply pricing alone that creates that. Although today we are going to have a particular focus on dynamic pricing. And ultimately, by having a revenue management strategy, all of the aspects are working towards, growing the top line revenue of your organization. And what we're seeing is when developing or creating an effective strategy, it can be really key about having the right tech stack in place to support you in automating and streamlining the approach, but also allowing you to continue evolving as the market is evolving as well. So we can see here, obviously, optimized rates. We know it's not the only factor that guests are considering when booking a stay, but we know it is a very key and important factor that needs to be, managed. And optimizing rates isn't always easy, but, by implementing the right tech stack, you can have a system that's automating the process of reading market trends and determining how those rates over the next 365 days are going to adjust for that property. When we come to the middle point then, so higher occupancy, and I think a common misconception of revenue management or of dynamic pricing is that it's always about hiking the rates up super, super high. But actually 50% of revenue management, the battle of it comes during the periods of low market demand as well. And in these periods of time, what we're actually looking to do is minimize vacant dates, but obviously making sure it's optimized to have a rate that you're still happy with, right? And treating, nights as almost like perishable goods, because once they've passed, we're not able to generate revenue on those. Then what we can see, this third aspect then is, predictable revenue. By having a revenue management system in place, it's also going to support you in forecasting future demand within your organization. And so what that can do is, create more predictability when creating forecasts across the entire business as a whole. So again, not just simply about hiking rates as high as possible, it's finding that combination of different factors. And of course, dynamic pricing comes in to support your pricing strategy to be, smart, scalable, and profitable. Aside from setting rates, though, having a great revenue management system or strategy can also support with various other aspects. So as you've mentioned, supporting conversations with owners. That might be navigating a difficult period in the year if there's changes in market trends and demand, for example. But it can also be, supporting changing strategies using, data that's backing those decision making and giving confidence and transparency when discussing with the owners. Today at the end, what we can do is have a jump into our owner insights function as well. So I can show you how Beyond have started to streamline and support those conversations with experts from the tool that's backed by data as well. And then, as you can see at the bottom here, data-driven insights. So this doesn't just have to be with existing owners and keeping them happy and giving them confidence. It can also be about, exploring new markets or working with new owners. showing that you have that depth of understanding in markets, deciding what's, a risk or a low risk in order to, continue developing your portfolio as well. But let's jump into dynamic pricing. As Brenda said, that's the focus today, right? So what is dynamic pricing? And I think you summarized it fantastically, Brenda. But ultimately, what we would say is it's the art of setting unique prices for individual properties based on market supply and market demand in order to achieve the, optimal revenue for that listing in the market. So let's have a look at how they've maybe evolved over time. And I think you've alluded to this already. But what we, can see here is an example of quite a basic, but still quite a fairly common strategy, okay, that we're seeing in short-term rentals. And that's having one set price across the calendar year that's not adjusting to different periods of demand or occupancy within the market. We're seeing the same price every single day. This may be, leaving opportunity. So maybe missing periods where we can take higher revenue from the listing, but also maybe overpricing during periods of lower demand as well. What we then see as the market starts to evolve is we're seeing, a bit more of a savvy approach to pricing, where we're seeing that the rates are fluctuating during higher or lower periods of demand. This might be around, holidays or events in the market. And we're starting to see, that's allowing us to create higher occupancy and higher ADRs as well. The only issue here can be that sometimes it's not capturing that granular level of demand fluctuations that maybe we're seeing during shoulder periods in the season. And so we, and beyond pricing and with other dynamic pricing tools as well, what we look to do is to take it to that next level and capture those, regular fluctuations, because what we're actually seeing here is that every single day in the calendar is creating a different level of demand from our guests. And so we want to automate that process in order to optimize, as we've said, on the average daily rates that we're able to establish and also the occupancy during low periods of demand as well. So I hope that kind of summarizes quite clearly where those opportunities lie and how we can take it that one, step further in terms of having those granular rates. But there's a lot that's going on in the background. So maybe we can show actually how are these prices determined in order to get to the final rates we're seeing. So what I've got here then is I've just taken a particular date. We've got May 26th, 2025, and we can see the final rate at the top is coming at £171. But what we can see on the left-hand side is there's various different factors that are being accounted for in order for us to come to that final predicted price. So let's have a look at how they're built. So the first thing that we can see at the top is the base price. And that's representing like the inherent value of this property. And it's the main control for dynamic pricing strategies. It can be adjusted maybe a few times in the year according to like the booking performance of the property. But it's really the starting point before all the different demand factors kick in. With Beyond, we have our revenue managers, and they're our team in-house of data scientists. And what they do is they review each listing's historic data, the market data, and they basically support in establishing this base price. So it's really representative of the listing and the uniqueness of it within that market as well. So, you're not left alone to set these. We're going to take into consideration your understanding of the property and the market, but combining those together to create a good base price there. Then the second aspect we can see is seasonality. So we understand throughout the course of the year, there's periods of higher and lower demand. It's not necessarily defined by specific dates as such, but again, it's that first step in terms of understanding how the rate and the demand is fluctuating throughout the course of the year. The third point then is day of the week. For example, we know in most markets, Saturdays are more valuable than Tuesdays. So we want to reflect that in the way that we price those days. And so you can see that here. The fourth part then we have is search demand data. And this is a really powerful way of incorporating guest search data from direct booking websites into your pricing strategy. It's currently only available with Beyond, and basically it's taken from your direct booking website to understand where there's an increase or a decrease in search volume for particular dates. I think the best way to explain where this comes into play is when we're looking at maybe events announcements. So we had a lot of people speaking about Taylor Swift, and she'd release a ticket and we'd see a big spike in the bookings for those days around the event. What we don't want to do is to be reactive. We want to be proactive, right? So what we'll see here is where we're starting to see a lot of searches for this particular date, and we know that that's going to create demand, as opposed to waiting for bookings to start generating in the market and potentially be leaving money on the table for those particular dates. The fifth point then is events, and these are sort of accounting for any short-term spikes in market demand. They're events, but it might not actually be a physical event taking place in the market. It could be a holiday, it could be a music event, as we've just spoken. It can be a variety of things. And what we want to do is make sure that we're aware of, the impact those are having on the demand, so that we can, relatively manage the rates associated. Number 6 is seasonality pacing. It's a newer factor that was developed to address the shifts in market seasonality over the past few years. We're seeing the markets are changing and evolving year over year. And so if we're spotting that the whole pacing is behind that of last year, whether that's with the rate or the occupancy, this factor's helping to ensure that we're staying up to date with the trends, as opposed to only relying on the history or historic data that we can see there. And number 8 then is the availability yielding. This is really relevant where we've got, for example, a Saturday that we've just said is like a high demand day, a higher value day. But if the Friday before is booked, it's creating limitations around that booking. So what we want to do is reflect the availability and how that impacts the rates as well when we're building that rate. After this, we then have time-based adjustments. So this can be, increases or decreases to the rate based on sort of the booking lead time for that stay. So as we can see here, we've got a last minute discount. So it could be that maybe this property's still got availability last minute. So we're putting a decrease in order to, optimize the occupancy we're getting for this listing. Then the final aspect then we've got here is custom revenue strategy. We understand that it's critical for property managers to retain control on their listings, right? They don't want to just take complete hands off the wheel and let the pricing strategy go. And that can be, to capture the goals of the property manager or the owners or the restrictions that they might have. So we want to allow that and how that applies to the strategy to be seen as well. And so I hope you can see there's a lot of different factors that are coming together in order for us to find that final £171 for this night. And, this is how we make sure that it's truly reflective and representative of what we're seeing within the market demand-wise, right? So yeah, now we can see then, as I just mentioned, it's critical that, we understand that there's different factors that are driving the strategy for each listing, each property, each owner. And so we don't want to be making you lose control of your rates. So I've just highlighted as well some of the different customizations that we can put in place in order for you to sort of have that input, because we understand property managers and owners are going to know their listings and their markets. So we want that to be reflective as well. Okay. So if you haven't tried dynamic pricing before, or this is sort of the first time considering it, we understand it can seem like a big shift, and maybe, not quite sure of what kind of changes you might see or what you can expect. So I just want to highlight here then on this next slide is the impact that we're looking to achieve with dynamic pricing and with revenue management tools. The first thing is, we're looking to streamline and optimize those processes, which ultimately allows you to have more time, which then can be reinvested into growing the portfolio, working on the business, or doing something completely different if that's what you choose to do with your time. But, we're looking to free that up and optimize that there. As I've mentioned, we're looking not only to lift revenue with higher average daily rates, but also by ensuring we're getting occupancy throughout the year. All in all, building revenue and lifting profits for property managers and owners. And of course, having that data gives you confidence, and having transparency behind that data as well means that you can speak clearly with your owners, help navigate any difficult situations, but also share the positives that you experience in the market and with their portfolio as well. And happier owners, happy property managers as well. Yeah, there's some of the changes we can expect. So just to sort of summarize then, revenue management is key to maximizing profits, and dynamic pricing really is part and parcel of revenue management, but it's not the only tool that becomes part of that process. Prices are determined by taking various different sort of demand and supply factors, as we've already reviewed today, but it's never about taking away control. And we always want you to have the customizations to have the best way of approaching it as you see fit for your portfolio and your goals. We're going to see changes in the daily rates. It's not that they're going to be completely swinging one way and then the other. They're, minor changes to represent the changes we're seeing in the market demand, and they're going to be regular so that you can be proactive and keep up with the evolving market. And ultimately, that's going to support you in saving time, building on revenue and profits, and keeping your owners happy. So I hope that was quite clear and concise, not too long when explaining there.